What an atrocious waste of resources I have just witnessed. I spent half a day in the courthouse here in Red Deer, Alberta. Besides the judge and the clerk and the officers and everyone, there were 7 lawyers inside litigating the case of Chris Scott, the businessman and restaurateur of the Whistle Stop Cafe in the tiny town of Mirror, Alberta, population 502. 5 of the lawyers were prosecutors of different stripes. The 2 lawyers standing with me are crowd-funded Lawyers for Freedom. As you know, Chris Scott is a mere human being and thus cannot afford to defend himself against the unlimited resources of the state. That's where the dream team comes in. We've talked before to Chad Williamson. Chad, nice to see you again.
Nice to see Ezra.
Right on. And Yoav Neve, you were on your feet in court today as well. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
We've met before, but it's the first time we've interviewed you. All right, well, we've just spent half a day here, and we were arguing not the substance of Chris Scott's case at the Whistle Stop, but a collateral matter, an application for further and better disclosure of documents. Is that an accurate statement of what we were doing in there today?
Yeah, so this is the first part of a multi-part disclosure application. And for any of the viewers that had remembered some of the prior proceedings, during the cross-examination of the Alberta Health Inspector, Mr. Ian Plishke, who was one of the central figures that was in Chris Scott's life for the 4 or 5 months preceding the charges that got dropped, during the cross-examination, we simply asked him if there were any internal emails. If they had had internal correspondence and discussions about Chris Scott and collecting evidence and about enforcement of Alberta Health Service mandates. And he said, yeah, we were. And we said, did you provide those to the Crown as you're required to do? And he said, no, we didn't. And then we said, we'd like to see those, please. And that's what's brought us down this path today. We did get the emails. We got about 600 or 700 pages of them. We think they're tremendously they're not flattering to Alberta Health Services. And that's what spurred the further disclosure, because within those emails, they've now mentioned that there was meeting notes and there's a whole bunch of other materials alluded to in the emails that were not provided in that batch of emails. So this is the first of many returns, I suppose, to the court on this particular matter.
And there were 5 government lawyers saying, do not show the records. And there's a lot of layers here. The first is, this is what happens when health bureaucrats, who until this moment in time, their chief duty was checking to make sure there was no mice in the kitchen. You're giving them quasi-police powers. So of course they don't know about disclosure. Of course they were political bureaucrats. That's another thing that shone through in the few disclosures you did get. It's just how petty and malicious and vindictive they were. They were mocking Chris Scott, calling him stupid. They were conspiring to see if they could get his landlord to evict him, which is bizarre. What health officer has that power?
There was even some offhanded remarks where during the correspondence, they had found a case of COVID at Save On Foods. And Mr. Plishke said, can't we just tell everybody that they all have COVID? And then another HF staffer, in kind of joking around, said, well, I secretly wish that this one came from the Whistle Stop. And frankly, I think that that's disgusting. These are people who should be protecting our public health, not joking about wishing that they had discovered COVID at some public protests. So I think that it's reprehensible for people who are on the government dime to be doing that.
And if I may also comment, it really does undermine the legitimacy of their argument that COVID is something that is such a significant public health factor, and yet at the same time they're wishing it upon someone else, notwithstanding the fact that it looks like they're taking it as some kind of a joke and personal vendetta against Chris Scott, where there's no evidence that any COVID cases came from that. And in fact, Ian Plishke testified that he didn't know of any COVID-related cases from any illegal outdoor gatherings at all.
I don't even know if that happens. I think from a scientific basis, that's just not something that happens. I did read through these disclosures, and there's very little talk about public health. It's all, how do we get this guy? They were seized with collateral purposes. What I mean by that is the reason they have the money and the power they're given is to protect us from the pandemic. But that is not what the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of memos and notes and emails and meetings were about. It was all, how do we get this stupid guy? They tried to get his insurance knocked out. They tried and get his alcohol license knocked out. Nothing to do with anything. They wanted to destroy this man. It was like I was watching a Tony Soprano show or something.
Absolutely. And their personal agenda is so powerfully reflected in those emails, and it's not reflected in the trial transcripts. It's as if that disclosure never existed. When you read the trial transcripts, you say to yourself, I didn't know any of this was going on. We were just enforcing public health. Emails tell a different story.
That was an excerpt from the Ezra Levant show. I'm Ezra Levant. Every weekday, I do a monologue about the topic of the day. Then I interview a fascinating guest either in studio or via Skype. And then I read your mail, whether it's fan mail or hate mail, which is sometimes even more interesting. This is on our premium service, though, called Rebel News Plus. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month or less if you buy a whole year in advance. You get my show every weeknight, plus Sheila Gunn Reid's show every week. It's called The Gun Show. It's pretty amazing. You know, we rely on you because we do not take a dime from the government. In Canada, that makes us almost unique. So please help us out and help yourself to some great journalism at rebelnewsplus.com.